Good morning, everyone. I'm Rebecca Williams, and I'm the North America Engagement Advisor for Axialent, a global consulting firm specializing in culture transformation and leadership development. At Axialent, we specialize in helping change the norms and mindsets that prevent human and business prosperity. This year, we are also proud to be the exclusive sponsors of the Fellowship, a 4-day organizational culture masterclass that will take place November 7th through the 11th in Santa Fe, New Mexico. In today's webinar, we're going to be talking about how to leverage your organizational culture to build a remarkable brand. And we have very special guests who are culture and branding pioneers to share some insights with us on how to do this. So if you have any questions, just to let you know, please put them in the chat because we'll have a Q&A time at the end. So I'd like to begin by introducing Teryluz Andreu, you can call her Terry, who is a partner and the Americas practice leader for Axialent. Terry is a powerful change agent, having worked with hundreds of companies to drive optimal culture and leadership behaviors to support their business objectives. Prior to joining Axialent, Terry served as the global and regional roles in major consultancies. I also want to let you know that Terry is in South Florida, so she is getting some feeder bands from the hurricane. And so if for any reason we lose her, she's fine, but there's some power and internet issues there today. So Terry, we're thinking about you.
Thank you, Rebecca. I hope that nothing happens. So very happy to be here.
Yes. I also want to introduce David Salyers, original Chick-fil-A marketing executive and Chick-fil-A branding pioneer. He's co-author of the book Remarkable, founder of Spark, a Revolution, and one of the keynote speakers for the Fellowship. David is one of the original 2 marketing executives at Chick-fil-A. David went on to spend 37 years in the Chick-fil-A marketing department, most recently as a vice president. David was also instrumental in the development and growth of the iconic cow campaign and the development and championed a marketing department that rose to international prominence. He is known for his marketing mind, his servant's heart, and his entrepreneurial spirit. Today, David helps companies that are looking to create a competitive advantage by building remarkable cultures and brands. So David, welcome.
Hey, what a thrill it is to join you two today. It's funny, my background is marketing, but my passion is culture. And I think we'll all see the connection of that before our webinar is over here. But Rebecca, I thought I might start just by giving you a little bit of background on how I ended up at Chick-fil-A. I ended up at Chick-fil-A 4 hours after college graduation. I graduated on a Saturday morning. I started 4 hours later, and Chick-fil-A was nothing like the Chick-fil-A people think of today. In fact, it wasn't a startup, but it was close. And the first office that I was in was a converted air freight warehouse. And there were probably 20 of us, 20, 25 people in it. They had run out of room in the warehouse. So they cut a hole through the wall, pulled up a mobile home. And my first office was in a mobile home attached to an air freight warehouse. That was the Chick-fil-A that I signed up for. And little did I know the journey I was going to go on, the journey we were going to go on collectively. Since that time, and the amazing impact that was going to have on my life and the life of so many people now. So it was very exciting. And one of the things that is fascinating to me is it's kind of like, okay, we're here to talk about culture. What does a chicken salesman know about culture? It's like, why would that, why would you have a guess that that's what they did? But what's fascinating is I think we're going to see over the course of our conversation, there's an incredible connection between great brands and great culture, and that it takes a great culture to build a great brand. And I saw that unfold. And fascinating, I retired from Chick-fil-A 4 years ago. I'm still actively pursuing some other things, but I get calls all the time from Chick-fil-A, but almost never is it about marketing, which is kind of fascinating. In fact, I was out at Chick-fil-A literally just yesterday, but they always call me back about culture issues. And that's what I was there for yesterday. So I think over the course of this conversation, we'll see those stories unfold and see the connection between great brands and great cultures. But I thought I'd start with this, just a little bit of peek into my life, but also I think a lot of people's lives. I started at age 21 at Chick-fil-A, and at age 21, I had all of life figured out, probably like you did and like Terry did. 21, we are the master of the world, and I had it all figured out. And here's the way I had it figured out. My whole goal in life at the time was I wanted to graduate from college, make as much money as I could, as fast as I could, to retire as early as I could. And my whole goal was to retire by age 35. I thought if I could just retire by age 35, how could life get any better than that? That was the best I had as a 21-year-old. And honestly, I share that with a lot of college students today. That's the best they've got too. They're like, yeah, how can it get any better than that? But what was fascinating is by meeting Truett Cathy and by going to work for Chick-fil-A, I discovered something that I would now call 1,000 times better than early retirement. Something that as a 21-year-old had never crossed my mind, nor could I even conceptualize of what I just discovered at Chick-fil-A. And again, as a guy whose goal was to retire early, I think it's fascinating that what I discovered was instead of finding the company and the job I could retire from early, I found the job I wouldn't want to retire from. See, that thought had never crossed my mind, that there could be a job you wouldn't want to retire from, or should be a job you wouldn't. All of my life I've been taught the whole point of work is to stop doing it. I'd never considered that work could be a source of richness and reward and excitement and contentment and engagement. It could be a source of joy in our lives. That thought had never crossed my mind, but that's what I discovered at Chick-fil-A. And interestingly, the founder of Chick-fil-A is a guy named Truett Cathy. He became like a second father to me in a lot of ways because I met him in college, and then I worked for him for 33 years. And I used to go on vacation with him. I remember we went to Cancun, Mexico together one time, went snowmobiling with him, all these things along the way. But I also remember visiting with him in his office when he was in his 80s. And at that time I said, Truett, man, what are you still doing here? Your 401k fully funded. He's the sole owner of a multi-billion-dollar business. It's like, why are you still here? And I thought his answer was very telling as it relates to our webinar today. His answer was, why would I stop doing something I love this much? And he said, if you love what you do, you'll never work another day in your life. So I feel like I never worked a day in my life for 37 years. I got paid anyway. Pretty good gig if you can get it. But I think more importantly, for the purpose of today, as we think about a lot of the people that are viewing today are in HR functions and people functions and culture development functions, how do we create the culture where people find jobs they wouldn't want to retire from? Where it's such a joy to come to work, where you love what you're doing and you love who you're doing it with, and you love the mission you're on, and you love who you're becoming in the process of accomplishing that mission. I think if we start to conceptualize culture as that, it changes a lot of things in the way we operate.
Yeah. And I think, David, you're bringing something that is very important, because many times when we talk about culture in the context of business, right, it is something that it is ways of working, how can we serve the strategy, but we're really talking about people. And people, we're emotional beings more than intellectual beings, right? So I think what Chick-fil-A did for you was create that emotional connection that helped you probably ride the bad moments, that happen at work, that we all, the challenges and difficulties, but gave you a sense of purpose, a sense of being, right? And also obviously aligned to your interests and your values. So I think that that's the power of culture, and we're going to be talking a little bit about how can we ignite that to make a very powerful brand. But I think that recognizing that we're talking about human beings, we're not talking about, machines or processes that live on an abstract. We're talking about people that have feelings, that need to have a sense of purpose, that we are living in a very important moment in which, at least for many of us here in the US, it's a privilege, but for many of us in the US, we can have a job that adds something to our life, right? It's not just for survival. it really can make a big difference, in terms of how we look at our jobs, our lives, and also the companies that we can build.
Terry, as you're
There's,
talking, and David, as you're talking, I'm thinking about something I read that you said, David, and that is you talk about the difference between being a business in business to get rich and being a rich business. Can you explain like that and how it fits in with these concepts?
Yeah, Rebecca, this is another big aha moment. Just like I learned, instead of finding the job I could retire from, I found the job I wouldn't want to retire from, kind of came out of left field for me. Same thing with this question. I think most people start a business as what I would call a get rich scheme. They start a business because they want to get rich. And quite frankly, it almost sounds bad, but quite frankly, that was me as a 21-year-old. I wanted to get a job because I wanted to get rich and retire. I was guilty of that. But the problem with a business as a get rich scheme is it's all about enriching our life at the expense of others. So a business as a get rich scheme enriches the owner's life at the expense of the employees. They enrich the owner's life at the expense of customers. They enrich the owner's life at the expense of suppliers. And they enrich their own life at the expense of the communities that we serve. And so fundamentally, there's a flaw if we view business as a platform to get rich. And what I think there are a lot of businesses, that's what they're pursuing, but I would contrast that with business as a be rich scheme. See, it sounds very similar, doesn't it? Get rich, be rich, almost sounds identical, but they're polar opposites. Polar opposites. See, business as a be rich scheme views the world this way. How do I use my platform of business to be rich toward my employees, not get rich from them? How do I use my platform of business to be rich toward my customers? How do I use my platform of business even to be rich toward my suppliers? That's a whole area we could talk about. And then how do I use my business as a platform to be rich toward the communities that I serve? So business is a be rich scheme, polar opposite of get rich. But I think if you want to have a strong culture, the be rich platform is a much better avenue to get there and makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. And if David, I have a client story which is very related to what you're saying. I'm like, nobody has gotten motivated to go the extra mile when the strategy of the purpose of the company is to increase sales by 20%. That doesn't inspire a lot of people, right? So I think that going back to what we're talking about, the emotional part, right? It's just being rich. It really tackles into the 3 dimensions of success, right? The people that work in that company or that help make the products and services come to life, which, many times is not just the employees, but also the partners that make that happen, the teams that work together to make it happen, and then the results that we're going to get. It's just going to be a result of what we do. And those 3 dimensions, this is what we call at Axialent, the I, the we, and the it, the 3 dimensions of success, of sustainable success, really come into play. So certainly you're illustrating that and how that can come to life.
Wow.
One of the things that I think feeds into this and helps us understand culture a little better is that the real riches in life, the ones that we really value, are never found in a bank account. They're found in the richness of relationships and the richness of growth and the richness of giving and all these things. And I think one of the things that Truett Cathy was particularly good at was most people want to reduce business to numbers on a spreadsheet. It's very tempting to do that because spreadsheets are an easy way to measure the progress of our business. And it's an easy way to see the progress of our business. But I think that the challenge is, probably the greatest mathematician in the history of the world, in my opinion, would be a guy named Albert Einstein. I think most of us could agree. He made his living with numbers on spreadsheets and formulas and that kind of thing. You know what his favorite quote was? Albert Einstein's favorite quote? You can sometimes when you see a picture of him in the old, you'll see this quote on his wall. It was, "Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts.
Counts.
And I think
Mm.
Truett had the ability to see that with great clarity. You know, the minute we try and reduce business to just numbers on a spreadsheet, we miss the things that count that can't be counted. And then we assume that everything on that spreadsheet counts because we reduced it to numbers on a spreadsheet. And I think that's the magic of culture and the magic of great business people is they see beyond the spreadsheet to the things that really count. It's not that we do need to be great at spreadsheet. Chick-fil-A had some of the greatest, you know, financial people and greatest spreadsheet people. It's just that's not enough to build a really great brand or a really great culture. We got to be good at that. It's necessary, but not sufficient to really create something remarkable.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And that's why, you know, when we are working with clients and we're trying to uncover what the current culture is, we can do a survey, you know, and you can come up with some very cool statistics and analytics, which we do. But the richest part are the stories that people tell. And the only way you can get that is through the qualitative assessments. You know, like when you talk to people, when we do focus groups, when we do interviews, it's remarkable how then that those numbers come to life. And I bet, David, the same thing happens with when we're talking about brands, right? Like the customer experience. Like it's not the same to say we have this level of engagement in social media or we have this, you know, this level of exposure in our ads, but it's just the stories that people tell that really make a difference and really bring that brand to life. And I guess it's the same thing with the employee experience as well.
You know, it's interesting. 100% agree, Terry. And as a marketing guy, you know what my favorite quote was?
Which one?
Advertising is the tax we pay for a product or service that's unremarkable.
Oh,
Advertising
I love it.
oh, wow.
Can you repeat that, because some of our marketing people will love that. Okay, go ahead.
So advertising is the tax we pay for a product or service that's unremarkable.
Oh, wow.
So I think the insight contained there is, you know, it's always been true that word of mouth advertising is the most powerful advertising. It's always been true. But how much more true is it today because of social media? You know, in today's terms, every customer has a megaphone and they're all using it. And so that's how a lot of decisions get made. And I think as a marketer, if you understand that, you understand that the point of marketing is not advertising or fonts or that. It's how do we make ourselves, put ourselves in a position to be positively remarked about. And that's the secret formula in that. But the same thing, Terry, is true of cultures. You know, the greatest cultures are the ones where the employees are positively remarking about them. And how do we create a culture where our own employees become our greatest recruiters?
Yeah.
Because they love what they do and they love who they're doing it with, and they want to invite other people into the system. You know, that's the secret of a great brand is they become so great at service and product that their customers become an unpaid sales force on their behalf as they go out and remark about them. Well, I think the same thing if we design a remarkable culture and a great culture, our own employees become our greatest ambassadors to go out and recruit the next people into the system. And we used to say, whatever's going on behind the counter at Chick-fil-A is contagious over the counter. So in other words, customers will never be more excited and passionate about your brand in a customer service business than your own employees are. So your own employees set the limit and set the level to which customers will rise. And so if you get your own customer engagement up, you can get your own employee engagement up, your customer engagement can go up.
Yeah.
And that's how the two are inextricably linked.
Wow.
Is that employee engagement is inextricably linked to customer engagement.
Wow.
Yeah, and one thing, you know, Rebecca and I spent a lot of time talking about engagement and studying engagement in many organizations, including Chick-fil-A many years ago. One thing that I say is that you can have high levels of employee engagement, but if you don't have the right strategy, it's like having a live wire that is not connected to anything, you know? So I think that both things need to happen. Because
Yes.
we have worked with organizations that have very high levels of engagement, but they're not necessarily translating that engagement, that energy into growth or results the other way around. You may have a great business strategy, investing in the right places, but then you're not taking care of engagement. And it's like pulling, it feels like you're just pulling a big boat, it's super painful for the leaders in the organization. So the sweet spot is both, right? You got to have the strategy, you got to have the vision of where you want to go and provide that direction so then people can pull in their energy into the right plugs, for lack of a better term. So,
well, that begs the question. So I know that we have all seen recent headlines involving companies with strong brands, some scandals that have been out there. And it really begs the question for me, can a company have a remarkable brand but a toxic culture? What's your take on that?
Well, I've personally never seen a remarkable brand come out of a toxic culture. To me, the culture has to come first. You got to have a remarkable culture to birth a remarkable brand. Now, one thing I have seen though, Rebecca, is sometimes you can have a remarkable culture, remarkable brand, and over time, the culture grows toxic. Maybe the leadership changes, there's some change that go on, but I think that signals that brand is about to no longer be one. That won't, they say that a cruise ship goes for miles after the engine dies. I think there could be brands out there where the engine has died, but the cruise ship's still moving because it's riding on the historic momentum. But for me, I've never seen a remarkable brand come out of a mediocre culture.
Oh, wow. So, that leads to, so how do you sustain it? So if you had it, and I think Terry and I a lot of times get called in when people are starting to erode. So Terry and I are kind of running triage. But how do you sustain it? Terry, David, what do you guys think?
Yeah. Well, Terry, I'll be glad to start unless you have something.
Yeah, go ahead, David, and I'll add on.
So I've got at least 2 points that I would tell you to focus on, Rebecca. One is, for anybody that's listening that is an engineer, you're probably familiar with something called the 80-20 principle. It's better known as the Pareto principle. And basically the Pareto principle says this, 20% of the input to any organization creates about 80% of the output. That there's a small minority of input that's disproportionate in the output that it creates. And it's not always exactly 80-20, it might be 70-30 or whatever, but roughly speaking, 80-20. And they proved, over and over again, the validity of this principle. So as you think, like for instance, at Chick-fil-A, 20% of our products, 80% of the revenue, and on and on and on it goes. But I've kind of come to the conclusion there's a derivative of that idea as it relates to culture and as it relates to business. And it's this: at Chick-fil-A, 80% of what we would do is exactly the same as what our competitors do. We buy land, we build buildings, we have drive-throughs, we serve food over counters, we have food in paper bags, on and on and on it goes. 80% of what we do is exactly the same as what all our competitors do. But the other 20% is dramatically different. But that 20% of what we do that's dramatically different creates almost 100% of the difference in results that Chick-fil-A has. It's a small minority of things that we do. So here's the challenge to most business. I can't tell you how many business meetings I'm in where people say, well, we have to do this because we've got to be competitive. Well, being competitive is the 80%. Is we do the same things as everyone else to stay the same as everyone else. I feel like Truett hired me not to make us competitive, but to create competitive advantages. And the competitive advantages are always born out of the 20% of what we think different, we do different, we act different. It's this difference part that creates competitive advantages. And I think as leaders, we've got to be super clear on what our competitive advantages are and protect them like Fort Knox. So getting back to the original question, where I've seen things go downhill for companies is when they lack clarity around what their 20% is and what their 80% is. And everything looks the same to them and they're trying to do everything versus a firm, crystal clear identification of their 20% competitive advantage and then protect that in every way possible. So I think that's part of the answer is, they say when you lose your why, you lose your way. And I think when you lose your clarity around that 20%, you lose your way and everything starts, kind of decay from there. And a lot of times over time, we lose clarity around what our competitive advantages are. We fail to keep creating new ones. And then we revert to, we have to do everything to be competitive. And then we revert to a commodity business instead of a
Yeah. David, what you're saying resonates with me, like having been in organizations that, probably have lost their way or also seeing it with clients. I will add to what you're saying is that once you get clarity in terms of what really differentiates your organization, makes you unique and powerful and distinctive, it's also that doesn't reside in just one or two people, right? That it's really, it's really very intentionally grown, and that's why culture is so important, right? Grown as part of the DNA of the organization. And that needs to be done very intentionally. What I've seen sometimes when cultures go in disarray is that when the founder leaves and then new people come in, right?
Yes.
And everything was residing maybe on the original team, and then kind of the company lost its way as it grows, as it becomes global, as it acquires new companies. So kind of getting clear on what's that DNA that makes you unique and that makes your clients come to you, and also energizes your people, makes this a different place, and being intentional about protecting that, but also evolving the other things, and being very conscious about those sometimes nasty habits that we acquire over time that may erode, that 20%. And I think that that's an ongoing dialogue and process that needs to happen in organizations. And I feel sometimes we either just become very busy on our day-to-day and don't have those conversations or don't create spaces for those conversations, or we kind of let it on maybe one or two figures, that will symbolize that, but we don't try to make that part of the DNA as the company grows and evolves.
Terry, that is so powerful what you just said. I couldn't agree more. Rebecca, I'm sorry, were you about to interject something?
No.
Okay. Let me share with you another little thing that contributes from what I've seen in terms of, especially when a founder leaves or whatever. One of my business school professors was a guy named Michael Porter, and some would argue he's the greatest professor in the world on the issue of strategy. And one of the things he taught me that I've never forgotten ever, and it was this aha moment for me, was that strategy is about trade-offs. And he said this, he said, if there is no trade-off, there is no strategy. And if there is no need for a trade-off, there is no need for a strategy. So if you use that as your filter, I'm in so many business meetings again where they talk about strategy, strategic this, strategic that, but most of the time when you listen to it, it's not a strategy, it's a statement, because there's no trade-off associated with it. So if you buy into that, if you understand that, then here's the interesting dilemma that occurs. Because you made a trade-off to enable the strategy to work, you make this trade-off. You give up something, essentially, in order to make it work. That's the trade-off. And it works spectacularly. So then the next leader comes in, and they see your strategy, and instead of focusing on the fact it worked, what do they focus on?
On the things that you're not doing.
The trade-off.
Yeah.
And they say, that's the problem with the strategy is look at this trade-off, look at what we're missing out on, look at what we're losing as a result of the strategy. So they start focusing on that, and then they walk away and they focus on that, but it undermines the very strategy that made you great. So that's another thing that I've seen through generations where strategies are working, but people point to the trade-off that enables the strategy as the problem with the strategy instead of the enabler.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Good point. And I think that that's when we get into like watered down businesses, you know, or from the HR world, which there's a lot of HR people in this call. That's when we get to like competency models or behavioral standards that are so generic that they don't speak anymore about what is it that makes us special, right? It's like a catch-all. It's more of a desirability list, and really doesn't speak to the thing that makes us unique or special, or and that requires trade-offs as well, which I absolutely agree with you, David.
You know, David, I love where you and Terry are going with this. And I know in your experience, like what you do now is you help companies build strong brand and cultures. And so I'm curious, what are the common obstacles that you see leaders? I hear one about strategy, but what are the obstacles that you see when people are working on culture and branding initiatives? And what learnings can you share from your experiences?
Such a great question, Rebecca. Let me start with marketing because I think it'll be easier for people to see, but I'll segue into culture because I think having established it through marketing, it'll be easier to see how it relates to culture. So I think one of the biggest challenges I see in people trying to grow their business from a marketing standpoint is they're focused on the wrong things. Their perspective and focus is on the wrong things. So for instance, in marketing, a lot of times people focus is on growing sales. It makes sense. Of course you would grow sales. I mean, that's the whole point of marketing. But we never talked about growing sales at Chick-fil-A. We talked about not creating sales, but rather creating raving fans. And here's the importance of that. You know, there's an old adage that how we view things drives how we do things. The way we see something has a dramatic impact on the way we respond to it. Therefore, if you view your job as to grow sales, those are the ideas you'll come up with. If you view your job as to grow fans, those are the ideas. And if I sent two groups and I said, you got an hour to brainstorm ways to create sales, they'd come back with a list. If I sent that same group, so you got an hour to come up with ideas to grow fans, I think it'd be a completely different list. And that's the issue. Because we had what we called our raving fan strategy at Chick-fil-A, that we want to create raving fans. And we had very specific strategies to go after that. But those strategies wouldn't make sense to a lot of other businesses if they thought their goal was to create sales, because sales are transactions, fans are relationships. And so it's a very different strategy to get there. And with sales, you're looking for a short-term impact. With raving fans, you're looking for a long-term impact. And, you know, I like to say I can create a sale for a day, or I can create sales for years to come by creating a fan. So our create raving fan strategy had three parts to it. We said we wanted to create operational excellence, meaning we're going to give people what they expect with excellence. The second part was we want to create second mile service experiences. Second mile is, you know, if first mile is all about giving people what they expect with excellence, the second mile is about giving people things they don't expect with excellence. And that takes it to, that's where they start raving. That's where they go from being a fan because they got what they expected to they're getting things way beyond what they expected. So they start to become raving fans. And then our third part was emotional connections marketing. And we said, we're going to invest our marketing funds in the lives of our customers, not in the bank accounts of an advertiser, you know, or a TV set. So we would literally take our marketing funds and invest in the community. How can we invest in the things our customers cared about? So if our customers cared about schools, how can we invest in the schools? If they had kids in Little League, how can we invest in the kids in Little League? Because by investing in things our customers cared about, they felt cared about, and then they want to support a business who does that.
Yeah.
So our whole, you know, that wouldn't have made a lot of sense to a lot of people, but for us, creating raving fans was the way we wanted to get sales for the long haul. So let me transition back to, because I know most of the people watching this are not in marketing, they're in culture and people. And let me tell you how this plays out there. What's your raving fan strategy for your employees? And the equivalent to sales for employees is paychecks, 401ks, health insurance, all these things that are necessary. That's the first mile. And we got to do that first mile, the operational excellence. We got to do that in an excellent way. But that's the starting point, not the ending point. We got to do all that. We got to, do all the things our employees expect with excellence. But what that does is enables us to go to the second mile. What are we doing for our employees they wouldn't expect? That blows their minds, that makes them want to remark about their job. And then that third mile, how are we creating emotional connections where our employees show up every day with a sense of community, a sense of purpose, and a sense of my life is going places. I'm on a mission I'm excited about. And that's the whole dimension of emotional connections. So I think the same strategy can apply to culture and people, but most people are only focused on that first mile. Doing what they expect with excellence.
Wow. Yeah, and I think, David, what you're saying, really we've seen the data, right? Like when we look into what are the key drivers of engagement in many organizations, they have to do with that part. It's the emotional connection. It's, am I being recognized? Do I feel I can grow here? Do I feel I am doing something that makes a difference? Do I have a connection, or can I work, as a team with people across the business? Those tend to be globally among the top 4, So no benefits, if people expect that. If you don't have that, if you don't have like the baseline, to your point, it's like the operational excellence, it is going to be a hole, and all the attention is going to go there. But really what really makes a difference, what makes people go that extra mile, is those things. And I think it's the same. The thing is the same with the customers. And it's very interesting because those are things that they don't necessarily take big budgets. It is, but take time and pay attention and take intentionality, right? And then how do you do that at scale in an organization? So it's not dependent upon one supervisor just being a good manager or a good leader. That's what happens in many organizations, is we leave those things up to the goodwill of whomever is leading that unit, and we don't take care of that. So that's why when we're talking about the mindsets, it really resonates with a lot of the work that we do, which is trying to create those mindsets at scale in a very intentional way, not just to put in the programs, right? Because you can put in the recognition program and put a fantastic recognition program in place. But if people feel, if the mindset is, you really need to go, it has to be extraordinary for you to recognize someone because we're paying people to do their jobs, then they're not going to use the program, right? Because the mindset is not appreciation, it's not gratitude. It's really kind of going the extraordinary mile, which also has to be recognized, but the day-to-day just falls through the cracks, right? So it is interesting, the parallels between what you're saying in terms of the raving fans and what we could do to create a culture and an employee experience that also, sparks that same level of emotion that the Chick-fil-A customers, have for the brand.
So we have just a couple minutes before we go into some questions, and I'm really curious because we know most of the people that are on the call right now, and the world has changed so much in the last 2 years, especially as it relates to how, where, when we work. What do you think leaders, the two of you, what would you say leaders need to be thinking about in the work experience so they can impact culture? What do you recommend? David, you want to go first and then Terry?
Yeah, I love this question because the world has changed. And I think sometimes it begs this question, Rebecca, what people want is not always the same as what they really want. Mm-hmm. And I remember somebody doing a talk on this. It was about what people want and then what they really want. Mm-hmm. And I think there's an issue currently that is similar to that. I think probably a lot of people watching this know a guy named Malcolm Gladwell. He's a great thought leader. He does a little blog post. He did one a few weeks ago that was very thought provoking for me. It's 2 or 3 weeks ago he did this, but his headline was this: have we really reduced our lives to this? And he was challenging the whole notion of working from home like permanently. And sometimes we have to say something extreme to make the point. So the way he articulated was this: he said, imagine you're a college student at age 21, you graduate, you go into your basement, you sit in front of your computer screen, and 40 years later, all you've done is come to work every day, sat in front of your computer screen. Is
So
that what
sad.
you really want?
So sad.
Yeah.
That's so provocative.
And he said, but at the same time, that's an extreme. I'm making the point through an extreme. But he said at the same time, people have loved what happened over the last couple of years, the flexibility it enabled, the more time with family, all that. But he said, you got to be careful, because we may look up one day and what they really want from their work experience is a sense of community, a sense of mission, a sense of engagement, a sense of reward and recognition, all these things they really want. And what he was saying is, if your whole experience at work is sitting in front of a computer screen in the basement, it's going to really be hard to give you everything you really want. So I think maybe we don't need to go back to the extreme, that where you've got to be in the office 9 to 5 every day, 365 days. It may not be that extreme either, but I think we got to be careful that we don't end up giving people what they want only to find out we didn't give them what they really wanted, which was a rich, rewarding work experience where they loved what they were doing, they loved who they were doing it with, they loved the mission they're on, and they love who they're becoming in the process, and they have a sense of community and a sense of communal mission with everybody. And it's going to be really difficult in an extreme of working from home to provide what they really want, even though in the short term they tell you that what they want is to work from home. I'm not sure in the long run, looking back on a career, that that's what they really want.
Wow.
And I think in the end, it's probably a mixture of the two. But let's not lose sight of what they really want and what are the conditions under which we can create what they really want.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back, David, to what you were mentioning before about the 80-20, right? Like talking about protecting the 20%. And how do we go into being very mindful about what would be required in new ways of working, right? What would be required to protect that 20% in a new environment, providing more flexibility, giving people more ownership of their jobs, and so on. But how can we protect that 20% that makes us wonderful and distinct and unique? And I think a lot of the conversations has been reduced to whether you work from home or you don't work from home, if you're hybrid or, if you work 4 days or work 5 days, which it's all the tactics, but I feel, and whether you need to be in the office so you can talk to other people. But I think there hasn't, because in some organizations, they haven't had the conversations about what that 20% is for our culture, then the conversations get reduced to that, to the tactics and not the essence. And I think that's when we can get creative, because if we know what the essence is, then I think you can go to people and source ideas, and who knows, there may be some stuff that you never thought about sitting on your, on your HR role or in your leadership role that you didn't think about, that we can still bring that to life in a maybe more flexible and more in tune with where we're living today. But we need to have that clarity on the 20%. And I feel in many organizations, we just haven't done that homework.
Well,
100%.
You guys, this is so fascinating. And I want to remind the audience that we've had a few questions come in, but please put questions in the chat, and we're going to do a flash round really fast before we go to questions. So flash round. Culture transformation requires personal transformation. So you have to change your mindsets, your behaviors. And I'm curious, David, for you, how did your experience at Chick-fil-A change you? What new mindsets did you adopt? What did you have to let go of? And then Terry, for you, a little bit of a twist on the question is, what have you seen And also, I've had the privilege of being parts of groups where you've set culture. How has that worked for you? But David, if you could go.
Well, they say that transformation of any business, organization, or person begins with a transformational perspective of that organization. So I think where transformation starts is transforming the way you see what you do. Let me give you an example from my Chick-fil-A career. I believe so strongly in this idea of transforming people's perspective, i.e. how we view things drives how we do things. How do we view them? That one of my favorite things to do at Chick-fil-A was visit with Chick-fil-A operators. And Chick-fil-A operators were not only some of the greatest business people I've ever known, they were some of the greatest human beings I've ever known. So I love to spend a day with them and learn from them. But my first question was always this: what business are you in? And what's fascinating about that question is that would give me a window into how they view what they do. But what's super fascinating is I probably asked that question 1,700 times over the course of my career. Not once did I get the obvious answer. And the obvious answer would be, I'm in the fast food business. I'm in the chicken sandwich sales business, whatever. But the best answer from my perspective I ever got was an operator in Virginia who told me this. They said, I feel like I'm a leadership development academy masquerading as a fast food restaurant. I'm a leadership development academy masquerading as a fast food restaurant. Think about the implications of that way of viewing what he was doing. See, yes, he sold chicken sandwiches, fries, and drinks, but that was not the product he wanted to offer the world. That was his funding mechanism of what he was offering the world. And in his mind, 70% of our workforce at Chick-fil-A, for most of my career, I don't know if it's still true, but historically, 70% of our workforce was teenagers. And so he said, you know what? I view my business as a platform to mold and shape the next generation of leaders for this world and my community. So I'm going to use my business as a platform to mold and shape leaders. And I'm going to help teach them good work ethic and values and give them, a different view of what they do and prepare them for whatever they're going to do down the road to be more successful at it. And so to me, that's a transformational way of viewing a fast food business, and it transforms the way you do it.
Yeah.
And so that to me was what I showed up as a stupid 21-year-old kid whose best idea was to retire at age 35. That was my perspective coming into business. And what changed most about me is to realize, well, that sounded good. It's back to what I wanted. But what I really wanted was something much better than that. Because if you unpack that one level deeper, if your whole goal is to retire by age 35, what does that mean about how much you're enjoying it in the interim? If your whole goal is to stop doing it as soon as possible, what that basically tells you is you're miserable and you're not enjoying it, so you want to stop doing it. I never considered that work could be a source of joy and satisfaction and contentment and excitement and enrichment in my life. That's what really changed the most about me, is viewing what I did at Chick-fil-A not as a means to a paycheck, but as a means to a purpose in life. And so when you start to view it that way, you do it so differently and you enjoy it so much more. And I felt like I'll give you this insight. When I would hire a new employee at Chick-fil-A, I never viewed it as hiring them. We had a 97% retention rate for my entire career at Chick-fil-A. 97% of the people that came to work stayed at Chick-fil-A. Same thing with our operators, 97% retention rate of the operators of individual Chick-fil-A locations. So realize that's the perspective I'm coming from. But we go through a very arduous interview process, Rebecca, as you well know, and we get to the end of it. And in the final interview, after they maybe have been interviewing 6 months or 12 months, or it was a long interview process because we knew they were going to be there 97% of the time for the rest of their career. So we felt like we could take our time, but here's the key to it. Last interview with me, I'd sit down and say, okay, so I hope you're going to make a lot of money at Chick-fil-A. I hope you're going to get paychecks that will blow your mind. But more importantly, to me, is at the end of your career, I want you to look me in the eye and tell me this: David, the least important thing I ever got from this organization was my paycheck. See, because for most people, the only thing they get of value from their business and their career is their paycheck. I want it to be the least important thing you. And then I'd ask a series of questions right after that about what would need to be true in their life for their paycheck to have been the least important thing they got. I'd ask about their goals. I'd ask about their who they wanted to become, who's important in their life. I'd ask about their bucket list items, all these things, because I felt like if I'm going to be their leader, I need to be the world's greatest student of them. I would take pages and pages of notes during that process of beyond your paycheck, what would need to be true for your paycheck to have been the least valuable thing you ever got from me in this organization.
Wow.
And after taking those page of notes, you know what I've just done? What that exercise just created? My job description as it relates to you.
Wow.
See, if I'm going to give you a job description and expect you to do it with excellence, I feel like I need to have a job description. My job description was helping you accomplish all those things on that list to make your paycheck the least important thing you ever got.
Wow. Well, we have a couple of questions that have come in for our last 5 minutes, but before we flip, Terry, anything you wanted to add?
No, the only thing I think, David, thank you for sharing your story. And
that's amazing.
I wish all of us had a leader like that, right? That would have been great. But I think the other thing that I will add for those that are listening and want to kind of start sparking this, and how do you do this? Start with mindsets, behaviors, and then results, right? Which is exactly what David has been saying and what we do with our clients at Axialent, is that transformation cannot happen in a vacuum. In organizations, we work in collaboration with others. We don't work by ourselves. So what I've seen really works is when you bring people together and you bring them on that transformational journey together. Because you can have one leader like David, right, that really wants to do the right thing and puts all this effort, and he's going to make an impact on that team. But what happens when that team needs to work with other teams, right? Everything just cracks down. And for David, it's just going to be hard to sustain that. So transformation, and I've seen this working with my clients at Axialent, really happens in the interaction with others, because you learn more about yourself when you have to react to other people. In a vacuum, by myself doing the training, yes, it will be perfect, but the only way I can put those things in practice is when I have to work with others, when I have to face difficult circumstances together, when we have to address a challenge. And I think that that's when these things start becoming real and become tangible. So I would encourage everyone to create those experiences together, because that's what's really make a big difference in transforming the way we think in an organization.
That is so powerful. So a couple of questions that have come in, and one thing I would say is this first question is particularly powerful. So I was someone who had the privilege to work with Chick-fil-A for over a decade in the area of engagement and culture as a consultant from the outside. And I remember one day interviewing a team member at a store in Texas. And he told me that he used to be in banking, and he would go to the mall to eat, and he'd see the line at Chick-fil-A, and he realized he wanted to be a part of that. So he had gone and become a cook. And I said, what do you do? So that question you asked, David, what is it? And he goes, I change people's lives. I smile. I change their day. I go out of my way to speak with them. So this culture carries to all levels. This guy left banking to be a part, and he was ready to work his way up. And so one of the questions that came from the audience is, what is the importance of Chick-fil-A's values in sustaining its culture of success? Those values.
Yeah. Values are an interesting thing. A lot of people create their list of values and they're just words on a wall. But in my experience, values aren't really valuable until we've had to sacrifice on behalf of those. I feel like where they come off the wall and become part of the culture is when we make intentional sacrifices in order to enable those. It's almost like back to that strategy discussion. What enables the strategy is the trade-off you had to make. I think what enables values is your sacrifice to enable those values to exist in your organization. And people need to see that decisions are made as a result of those values, and it's called out, and they see that the leaders are role modeling those values. And they say culture is more caught than taught. I don't think culture can just be a class that you go to. You've got to catch them by the examples of the leaders and by seeing decisions that were made in alignment with those values that cost you something as a result of it, because then they know you really value them.
I love it. Well, we are at time. And so
we could be talking forever. This is
I know. I have like 1,000 other questions. Like I'm ready. But before we do
part 2, David, this has been a lot of fun.
We might have to do a second. You guys, thank you so much. I wanted to share a quick slide that talked about next steps, because David, you are our main speaker coming up at the fellowship. So we'll share a quick slide right now and chat a little bit on next steps.
Yeah. So while Diego puts that up for all of us, we want to encourage you to check out the fellowship. It's a great event, and David, Rebecca, and myself will be there together with many other great speakers. So you can scan this code if you want to learn more about the fellowship. It's a 4-day event in Santa Fe, New Mexico, coming up in November. And we'll have a lot of fun, and you're going to walk out of those 4 days with a great culture transformation roadmap. So that's our promise to you. And you have a step-by-step guide to do that. And also follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram. We are going to be sharing some of the insights from today. You can follow me, you can follow David to stay up to date in all the latest and greatest thought leadership regarding culture, brand, and transformation. So thank you all. Thank you, David.
Thank you, everyone. David, Terry, thank you both for all of your insights today. And thanks to everyone who attended. There'll be a recording too that you can grab to watch this again if you want to pull some of those insights out. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.